welcome to Season 1, Episode 16 of the Blues Jam podcast. And this week, I have been speaking with Andy Devine from the band Dog Shark. We talked about his early inspirations, how he made music work for him, and we talked in some detail about their soon-to-be released studio album, Earth Is Not Room Enough. If you like your blues a little bit more rocking, a little bit more distorted, then you have to get yourself a copy of this. There will of course be links up to their pages on Instagram and YouTube. From there you'll be able to find out how you can get yourself a copy. Now, unfortunately, there was some human error during the middle third of this interview. I forgot to press record on the Zoom meeting. So, if you're watching this episode, that middle third is just the screen, will be just the Blues Jam podcast logo. So, sorry about that. But the critical audio is there, so keep watching. It is a long one this week, but it's worth watching all the way till the end, because that is when we sort of dissect the album Earth Is Not Room Enough. So stay tuned, and as always, stay tuned till the end of the episode where I'll be giving notices of jams that are coming up over the next couple of weeks. I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much. And so we will start with, as always, may you please introduce yourself?
Well, yeah. Hi, Brett. Great to talk to you. My name's Andy Devine. I'm the singer and guitar player from Dog Shark, formerly and kind of still known as Dog Shark Blues, but we're kind of transitioning into a new era where we've simplified the name. We're more putting ourselves out there as just Dog Shark now, but I front and manage the band.
And you've just released a new album, which we will get to, but I want to ask you some other stuff first leading up to that, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Brilliant. So, Andy, for context, how old are you?
Mid-40s.
Yeah,
without putting a number.
Yeah, you're willing to give an age. You're welcome to give an age bracket. That's brilliant. Mid-40s is great. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Very similar.
No spring chicken by any means. So.
Well, and I'm allowed to say that because I fit into that exact age bracket as well. So, which is great because that means, I can really, okay, I can really put some context to a few things. And how old were you when you first started getting involved in music? And was there like a particular thing that got you involved in music?
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. When I tell people this, they find it a bit unusual. But Arnold Schwarzenegger got me into playing guitar.
Brilliant.
Mostly because when I was a little kid, I was obsessed with movies and action movies and sci-fi movies and all that stuff. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was the biggest star on the planet. And just around about the age of 11, 12 years old, they were just releasing Terminator 2, the movie. Yeah. And it was the biggest thing known to man at the time. And I remember we just got MTV for the first time around then. And I was watching music videos, and this video for a song called You Could Be Mine by Guns N' Roses popped up. And it had Arnie in the video. And that was the first thing that caught my attention. But then I realised, hang on, this song kicks ass. So all of a sudden I was paying more attention to music. And not too long after that, my parents were very kind enough to take me to a Guns N' Roses concert, a huge stadium concert. I was like 12 years old. I'd never been to a concert anywhere before.
Wow.
And the first one I was at, I walked in the door, and on stage already was Soundgarden, followed shortly after by Faith No More, and then Guns N' Roses. And that was it. I was just blown away, mind blown completely. And immediately after that, it was just dived into guitar.
What a lineup! Really, Soundgarden, Faith No More, then Guns N' Roses. Wow.
Yeah, And little 12-year-old me was, impressionable as anything, and took all that in, and then, I've never been the same since. So,
then,
but yeah, I was really grateful for that experience, to be honest, because it made all the difference. I could have had a very different path in life if it hadn't been for that.
And so how long was it after that till you got your first guitar?
Not long, a couple of months. I think I had a birthday coming up, and that was it. It was like, I have to get a guitar. But it wasn't an easy path in, because I didn't really have anybody around me to guide me on this, and it was kind of like I was at the mercy of my generous parents who wanted to help me out and support it, but didn't really know what to do or what to get me. And I got this hideous acoustic that just kind of put me off more than anything else. But bit of an odd story. What really got me into playing more, obviously it got me interested, that experience, but what really got me into playing more was I had an uncle who, bit of a sad story really, because he later in life succumbed to acute schizophrenia and ended up being sectioned and all that. But when he was still kind of sociable and could interact with the family and whatnot, he used to come and visit, and he was a huge Beatles fan. And he was the first person to ever teach me to play something that sounded like a song. Before then, I'd struggled along learning chords from a book, and it hadn't really coalesced into anything that I recognised that I could connect with,
Right.
And he taught me how to play, not even a real proper guitar part, but just the vocal melody part from Get Back by the Beatles. And it was the first time I'd heard something that sounded like a real thing come from my hands.
Right.
And that was it. That was what really hooked me in. And it gave me a few pointers on where to look at to pick up songs, like how to read tablature and things like that. And that was it. I was just on with it from then on.
Do 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 do
Yeah.
do.
Jojo was a man.
Yeah.
Thought it was.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think about that. Thank you. That's tonight's task. That's tonight's practice. After.
It was just like I say, it was that difference between struggling along, making sounds that didn't quite sound right to me,
right,
to suddenly grasping something that sounded like something I recognised.
So was that going from so you kind of went from chords that you were learning to like a single line melody on single strings and...
Yeah, I mean, you can simplify it more than that. It really was down to just... Before then, I'd made a load of bad noises that didn't sound like anything. And suddenly somebody showed me something that made sense how to do it, and it sounded like something I recognised. And that was the real hook, that all of a sudden I could actually make a noise that sounded like something.
What was your musical ear like? So what was learning that line a matter of sort of remembering what your uncle showed you, or was it a matter of being guided and being able to hear, like, oh yeah, I can hear that it must go then to here, and then it goes to here, and then it comes back to this, or what was that process like? Can you remember?
It was finding the places on the fretboard that made it in the right order, that made the sounds how I heard it in my head, or how I wanted to hear it in my head. I think I'll be honest with you. To this day, I've never really learned theory.
Right.
I've always played from what I hear, and when I improvise or when I create or anything like that, I'm entirely focused on just satisfying my audio desires, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
And I don't think about the methodology, I don't think about the theory, I don't think about the structure, or this bit should go after that bit according to the theory or whatever. So to me, it was always just about creating the sounds I wanted to hear. And I find where those phrases are, or those notes are, or those chords are on the fretboard, and find the shapes that my fingers need to make, and then practice it until it sounds good. But yeah, that's kind of how everything came to me over the years. It's It's just a case of finding where your fingers go. I probably could have shaved a few hours of discovery off it, but I tend to just fall into improvisation to find things,
Right.
improvise around until it happens. And usually as well, by doing that, I'll discover a bunch of other stuff I didn't necessarily set out to.
Right. Okay.
So it can be helpful to do that. As it can also be a huge waste of time if you don't get where you want to be.
Yeah.
But it kind of from the off, I was kind of improvising with everything, and until I found what it was that I wanted to hear.
And
But,
how long was it then until you got an electric guitar and started to get more hyped on
not
it?
long. Yeah, not long at all. I think a friend of the family, he had a couple of really battered old copy guitars, like a Les Paul and a Strat copy. And I'll be honest with you, in years to come, I've actually taught people and imparted knowledge and, given advice on getting started. And it's one of those areas that I feel if you get it right or you get it wrong, it can make all the difference right at the beginning. And I almost got it wrong to the point where I was put off playing. And that was down to just how bad the guitars were.
Right, okay.
that I found in my hands when I was first getting going. So my advice to beginners starting out has always been, make sure you've got your guitar in good order. And if you're not sure how to do that yourself, find somebody who can. Because my experience early on was, I got my hands on a few guitars, acoustic, electric, whatever, but nobody had set them up. They were all over the place. The action was terrible. The setup was, absolutely terrible on them, and the electrics were all faulty. And it was, I could have at any point just caved in to those sort of obstacles. But in some ways, it also forced me to learn about those aspects of playing guitar, even if because I simply had to. I wasn't surrounded by anybody who else was kind of doing it, so I had to figure these things out for myself. But the first electric guitars were really cheap, nasty copies, hand-me-downs, not good enough to stay in somebody's collection to the point where they were happy to give them away to a young kid just trying to get going. I believe I had one guitar that had a Judge Dredd face painted on it at one point.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it was a very long time into my actual sort of playing life before I got what I would call a nice guitar. I struggled away with cheap stuff for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, I can kind of relate to that stuff. Yeah, I didn't have a great guitar to start with, but I didn't really. One of my regrets is not taking it a little bit more seriously at that, and in those sort of teenage years. I had other stuff going on as well. I'm certainly taking it a lot more seriously now. Certainly a lot more aware of things like setting up the guitar properly and actually regularly changing strings and things like that. Just as basic starting points. And like, it's all right to put some lemon oil down when you change your strings, and basic points like that. But anyway, So you're developing on. You're moving into electric guitars. You're struggling through with the basic ones you've been given. Are you still listening to like Guns N' Roses and what else are you listening to at that point?
Yeah, so I young kid, I was a metalhead really,
Right.
And I got really deep into some of the more extreme metal. Like I went through Metallica, into bands like Slayer and Sepultura and Pantera and all that. But I again, even at that young age, I had the luxury of going to watch these bands. I was going to Donington Monsters of Rock Festival. In fact, if you see behind me there, that framed picture is actually a T-shirt from Donington 1992 when I was 12 years old. That's the actual T-shirt I got. So that was Iron Maiden, Skid Row, Slayer. And then just next to it, you can't really see it, but that was Donington 95 T-shirt. Where Metallica was headlining. You had Machine Head and White Zombie and all kinds of metal bands, and that was really my thing. But I'll be honest with you, that was really the beginnings of my journey into playing guitar, was discovering. I think the thing that impressed me the most in all of that music was the power. and the aggression. And what, in terms of musicality, what really drew me into that type of music was the rhythm guitar,
Right.
and just the sheer power. I'll be honest with you, never really been interested in metal solos, guitar solos. They don't
Right.
really do much for me. But James Hetfield from Metallica was the biggest influence on me for many, many years when I was first starting out. And I learned every single Metallica song, but just the rhythm.
Right.
I very rarely bothered learning a Kirk Hammett guitar solo, but I was all about learning those rhythms that James Hetfield was laying down, because I was so impressed with just the tightness and the power and the aggression and the delivery. And all of the bands that sort of branched off from that sort of core, appealed to me too. Some, like I say, some of the more extreme stuff like Slayer and bands like, just because of the what I was discovering was just the talent involved in those things, because I was beginning to understand the guitar. I was beginning to appreciate just how good these guys were. And when you're a kid, you kind of want to rebel. You kind of want to break out from the norm. And you've got parents who like listening to Santana and Barry White and stuff like that. You kind of want to step away from that a little bit. But it wasn't very long before I started to come back around to some of the things that they really liked, and which was bands like Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Hendrix, and I kind of went round the metal houses to come back to classic rock and then the blues. And once we're here to talk about the blues, really, aren't we? And it was. I'll be honest with you, my whole playing as a musician, I feel, only blossomed properly once I discovered the blues. But my route into the blues was via metal, and then back to classic rock, and then
It's a very, very common story, and it doesn't matter whether your age starts with a 4 or a 5. I'm beginning to really. This is such a common theme that is coming through these interviews, especially here in the UK, and one that I can totally relate to. I mean, I was lucky that I grew up in a house where we had 2 Black Sabbath albums. So weirdly, before I found Metallica, I found Black Sabbath, and I was like, "This is amazing!" I'm like a little 8-year-old, like in the '80s, putting on the Sabbath albums on the turntable and putting it on. But the same as you, when I heard those Metallica riffs, I was like, "This is like Sabbath, like cranked up even more." And then, and I'm a massive Hetfield fan, massive Hetfield fan. And then when I heard Pantera and heard what Dimebag was doing, I was just like, "Oh my days! How is this guy doing this? How is he?" And then I heard the other day the phrase like groove metal to describe Pantera, and I was like, "That is precisely what it is. That is so good." And then, like you say, and as everyone else has said, and myself as well, you start reading about these bands, and you start reading about how they were influenced by Black Sabbath, and like you say, then you see the connection with like Sabbath, Clapton, even Santana to a point, and then go back from them and so on and so until you end up at the sort of Robert Johnson, Lead Belly.
Yeah, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head, because the route for me to the blues was a journey of discovery, and it all stems from my desire to understand who my favourite bands were influenced by. And I guess you kind of always end up having this backward journey. But I was really lucky that every time I looked, I discovered a new band that was really great, and I found out who their influences were. I was lucky enough for like my mother or father to go, "Oh, we've got one of their albums stashed away." Brilliant. So I'd be like talking to them about Metallica, and they'd be like, "Well, Metallica said they were influenced by Black Sabbath. They'd pull out Volume 4 from the record collection, or or something like that, or they'd pull out The Song Remains the Same on VHS by Led Zeppelin and stick this. Oh, you got to watch this." So I had it all sitting there waiting for me to discover, and it was nice to have it easily on tap. What I would also say is, when sort of as I was really getting into it, as well as the metal scene, our generation, I'm assuming you're more or less the same age as me, are you? Yeah. So we had the whole grunge
Yes.
movement and Nirvana.
Yeah.
And of course, Nirvana came along and opened everybody's eyes to the grunge scene. But I always remember this, and I tell this story fairly frequently. But my mother, I have a lot to thank for my influences in music. I remember she came home one day, and she had this little bag from. You remember a record store called Our Price?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So she had this little bag from Our Price. I was like, "What's in there, Mum?" And it was 4 cassettes that she'd bought, and she'd ordered them because you couldn't get them. They weren't actually. Some of them weren't in the stores, or I think some of them were just about to be released. And it was 4 albums, and it was Pearl Jam 10, Soundgarden Bad Motorfinger, Mother Love Bone's Apple album, and an album called Temple of the Dog. Are you familiar with all those albums?
I'm definitely familiar. With 10, with Pearl Jam. Yeah. The other ones I've heard of the bands, but I don't know those albums particularly well.
So those 4 albums for me are like the absolute core genesis of the grunge movement, because if you talk about Pearl Jam, you have to start with talking about a band called Mother Love Bone. Before Pearl Jam, most of the guys in Pearl Jam were in a band called Mother Love Bone, right. And the only difference being they had a different singer, a guy called Andrew Wood. Now, Andrew Wood, tragically, just as they were about to blow up huge with this album called Apple, he died of a heroin overdose. And he was so, beloved by everybody else in the scene that Pearl Jam, or what was left of Mother Love Bone, teamed up with Chris Cornell and I believe the drummer from Soundgarden, right, to do a tribute album to this guy called Temple of the Dog. So it's kind of like a project between like a supergroup, half of Soundgarden and half of Pearl Jam.
Yeah, right.
This is one of the most amazing albums ever recorded. If you're into grunge,
Temple of the Dog.
Temple of the Dog. It's called. Honestly, there's a song on there called "Say Hello to Heaven," and that will be my funeral song. When I shuffle off this mortal coil, because it's just the most incredible album, full of power and passion and beauty, but it really brings out the best of that whole grunge scene, because it's got those collaboration between those 2 bands, and it's the very beginnings of Pearl Jam, because you also have Eddie Vedder showing up on one of the songs on that album, right? And then the next thing you get is Pearl Jam 10, their first debut album, and everybody knows what happened after that. But those 4 albums, so Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger was released in the midst of all that as well. Right. So those 4 albums were just like the core of the whole grunge Seattle scene. I mean, to me, then you had Alice in Chains, who to me were every bit as great as all those other bands, and later on became much more of an influence of mine than all those other bands. Mostly because
only in about the last year have I become really acquainted with that first Alice in Chains album, and when I first put it on, I was like, why have I not been listening to this? Like, this is amazing. But go on, sorry.
I was just saying that I'm obviously, as much as I'm a guitar player, I also sing in the band.
Yeah, right, okay.
So I've over the years I've took influences from various things for different reasons, and for me, guitar came from a lot of different places, but the major vocal sort of influence on me has come all from the grunge scene, all from the grunge sort of bands, and none more than Alice in Chains, simply because Lane Staley, who sang for Alice in Chains, to me is just possibly the greatest rock vocalist of all time ever, just because he had such character in his voice. He just sounded so different to everybody else, and then what he could do with vocal structure and harmony just blew my mind completely. And my first adventures into vocal harmonies were all learning Alice in Chains songs, and trying to figure out what he was doing and just how he pitched things around, like the main vocal melody, and added extra parts in, and just massive influence, the whole grunge thing. But and a genre very heavily influenced by the blues as well.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm looking over at my notes about each different song on your new album. Anyway, right. Okay. When did so that's like quite a lot of your formative teenage years.
Yeah.
Did you start forming bands at that point, or was that a little bit later on, or?
Yeah, I mean, God, coming out of high school, so like 16 years old, when I was sort of joining my first bands. At that point, I was just keen to get in any old band I could, so I discovered a bunch of lads locally. They needed a bass player, so I jumped in on bass, and that didn't go too well for too long. And then I left that band, and they asked me to join again, and I said, only if you let me play guitar. So they did. And I'll be honest with you, that band was great. It was an originals band. We wrote our own stuff. And actually, some of the stuff I played with that band that I was responsible for writing actually shows up on this new album. We'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. But I was in and out of that band quite a few times. But really, my serious playing started when I got a chance to start working professionally when I was about 18, 19, maybe 20. I had a friend who I'd shared a flat with when we were students, and we'd been at college together, and then we'd kind of gone our separate ways a little bit, and then he showed up at my house one day, and he'd been out in the Middle East. He'd been out to Bahrain, and he'd been out there for about 6, 7, 8 months. And Jez, his name is, and if he listens to this, I'll have to say hi. Hi, Jez. He came back and said, Andy, he says, I've just had the best time of my life. He says, I joined up with a guy. This is Scarborough we were growing up in. He says, I joined up with this other guy who's a bass player from Scarborough who started a band to play out in the Middle East, to play in the hotels out there. It was other work, it was a show band,
Right.
He says, but it was a party every night. It was playing 6 nights a week, 3 or 4 hours a night, bar full of drunk girls every single night. It was just the most amazing thing. And as soon as he told me that, I was like, Jez, man, are you going back? And he was like, well, yeah, we're kind of reforming the band. We're looking for some new people. I said, well, you got to get me into that. So yeah, we all joined up. I got together with these guys, and we were about to go out to the Middle East when 9/11 happened. We were literally on the cusp of signing a contract with the agency over there that that put these bands in all these hotels, and 9/11 happened. And I don't know if you remember at all what impact that had on travel and the West's relationship with the Middle East, and people wanting to travel to the Middle East. I mean, we were only planning on going to like Bahrain, but it was a big question mark over everything. And it basically put us back by about a year. We spent the year in the UK kind of just tooling around, gigging wherever we could find gigs around the country, and just kind of tightening the band up as best we could to get us ready to go out there. But yeah, we probably could have been out there quite a lot earlier if it hadn't have been for 9/11 and the whole terrible thing that happened. And I remember the day. I actually remember the day that happened. We were due to rehearse, and I turned up at our bass player's house. We were all meeting there, and it was like 2:00 in the afternoon. If you remember when it happened, it was 9 a.m.
Their
in
time,
New York,
2
which was
a.m.
about
2 p.m. our time.
2 p.m. Sorry, 2 p.m. So I walked into his. I remember walking into his flat, and he says, "Andy," he says, "have you seen what's happening?" And we had the TV on, and it was just after the first plane had hit.
Yeah.
And as we're sitting there watching, the second one goes in, and then we cancelled the rehearsal and just all sat watching what happened unfold live on the TV. And the world was never the same place, was it? After that?
No.
And
No, it absolutely wasn't. If you're old enough to remember that happening, you're old enough to remember that there was pre 9/11 and there was post 9/11, and that was that.
It was it was a very very different world before and after.
Yeah.
And so what made that really interesting for us was we were heading out there to the Middle East, where it was all happening. And so, about not too long after 9/11 happened, I think maybe like 8, 9, 10 months, something like that, we finally landed a contract with a company that owned a chain of bars around the Middle East. They were called Rock Bottom Cafe, and they were basically like, have you ever been to a Hard Rock Cafe?
No, but I've heard, obviously I know about them.
Yeah, so there's rock and roll paraphernalia everywhere, guitars up on the walls. This place had like Harley Davidson motorcycles, like set up on the bar at the back, you know. And it was like a Hard Rock Cafe, but in the middle was a huge dance floor and a big stage and a DJ booth. And they would hire bands to play 6 nights a week for up to 6 months at a time. And you would live in the hotel above the bar. You have your own room. Everything was catered for. You were fed and watered. You were paid cash every couple of weeks. And you got free drinks as well behind the bar to a point. And all you had to do was play Summer of '69 every night for 6 months. But no, honestly, it was the most insane party atmosphere because especially the first place we went to, that was Bahrain. It was in a little part of Bahrain called Manama. Now, Manama was a man-made part of the island that they reclaimed from the sea and were building hotels and stuff on. And we were in this brand new hotel. They just finished building the bar. And if you know anything about Bahrain and the military and how that works out in the Middle East, you have the major U.S. naval base for the entire Middle East operations in Bahrain. They have this agreement with the Bahraini king to protect their oil interests and their oil exports, and in return, the king let them build this immense navy base right smack bang in the Persian Gulf. And the main entrance to that navy base was about 100 yards outside the hotel where we lived and played every night. So you can imagine the type of clientele. It was a Hard Rock Cafe type place, Rock Bottom Cafe, Harley Davidsons and American flags everywhere. It would fill up with all of the military the Navy were moving all the military around, so it wasn't just Navy, it was Air Force and Marines and everybody, right? They would all pile into our bar every night, and they were either on their way out to fight the war in the Persian Gulf, or they were on the way to Afghanistan, or they were while we were still out there. The invasion of Iraq happened the second time they went into Iraq and got rid of Saddam Hussein. And so we were basically out there entertaining the troops throughout that whole period. And it was an absolutely insane time because, like I say, the bar every night was either full of people on their way to fight a war, and they didn't know if they were coming back, so they would party hard, or they'd survived and they were on their way back out, in which case they would party even harder. And we were the entertainment. And we were the kind of covers band as well. I mean, you go and watch a lot of these sort of party band, covers bands, showcase bands, whatever you call them, and they're pretty mundane, they're pretty run of the mill sort of things. But we had an attitude that, imagine if the Red Hot Chili Peppers was a party band, right? That was what we did. That was how we did it. We gave it that amount of energy and attitude and aggression. And if we played something like a 50 Cent song or Summer of '69 or whatever it was, we'd give it that tint, we'd give it that sort of approach. And it was great. We had a female vocalist from the Philippines. We had a rapper from Canada. So it was a hell of a variety. It was. We could do any type of song, any type of atmosphere, and it was a great time. And I did that for a good number of years, 3 or 4 or 5 years. We won a bunch of competitions out there as well. The hotel used to like entering us into competitions, and we cycled around the whole Middle East. So we'd do 6 months in Bahrain, and then they'd send us to Abu Dhabi, and they had a bar in Abu Dhabi, and we'd play there for 6 months. Then it might be Ramadan, we'd have to come home for a month, and then we'd be back out, we'd do Dubai, and then they just cycled us around. So over the space of the bunch of years I was out there, we were kind of all cycling around these same few bars and hotels. But it was intense, just playing that much 6 nights a week, playing stuff you're not that bothered about as well. I'll be honest with you, it burned me out. It really, really burned me out. Yeah, too much of a good thing. Classic story. Yeah, 6 nights a week, partying hard, doing all the things you shouldn't do. And I was very, very lucky that I'd met my wife not long into what ended up being my final sort of contract out in the Middle East. And I decided, not because I'd met my wife, but I just decided the time was right for me to move on and try something else. And so my wife, she's from Bulgaria, so she was out there doing her thing out there, and I was out there from England doing my thing out there. And we decided to call it a day. But I saw the contract out. I left those guys amicably, and they're still really good pals. And I came back to the UK, and I brought my wife over here, and we settled down. And I tried to continue on with a musical career. But I'll be honest with you, it just didn't happen. These things, sometimes things just don't work out, do they? I tried joining a bunch of different bands, and I tried starting my own recording business. And this was like the early 2000s, mid 2010s. Well, yeah, like 2005, 6, around that time. And technology wasn't prepared for what I was trying to do. I think I was a little bit ahead of my time for what I was trying to do. What I was trying to do was like a mobile recording service, basically a recording studio on wheels, where I would rock up and record whatever wanted recording. So that might be a band in a rehearsal studio or in a garage or a gig or something like that. And it was, well, if you remember what laptops and audio interfaces were like back in those days.
Yeah.
They were okay, but they weren't particularly good for roaming around and doing things. Mobile laptops weren't, unless you had a lot of money. They weren't up to much.
No, they're pretty basic to say the least, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and I got help from the Prince's Trust as well. I put a proposal together. I got a loan from the Prince's Trust to help fund all that. But then it just turned out to be a no-go on that one. So I parked that business, and I tried playing a bunch of different bands, and nothing really caught me. Nothing really got going anywhere. There was one band I was in for a while that looked like it might achieve something. They'd won a Virgin Radio competition to support Bon Jovi.
Okay.
And they'd supported Bon Jovi for a couple of nights at Milton Keynes. And off the back of that, we're getting some interest from labels and things like that. I'd actually played for them previously and left just before they did that. And then after they did that, the band leader asked me to join again because they wanted to just kind of like tidy themselves up a little bit musically. And we were starting to actually get some attention. We were in the studio recording some tracks. And then a really tragic thing happened, and the guy whose band it was, his girlfriend was killed in a car crash, and it just threw him completely out. He was there, he witnessed it, and it was it was a terrible thing, and he was a brilliant guy, and he was a lovely guy. And it was one of the most sort of passionate and driven guys I've ever worked with in a band, but it just wiped him out, and the whole thing kind of lost focus, and we drifted apart a little bit and all went our separate ways. And I'll be honest with you, after that, I basically sat myself behind a desk for over a decade and barely picked a guitar up. It was only really my old band from way back came around once more, and we had another go at things, but nothing really came of that. But I had not picked a guitar up in best part of 5 years when we went into lockdown with COVID.
Right.
And I'd been going to concerts and been doing all that stuff with pals, and when COVID happened and we all got locked down and trapped at home and concerts got shut down and everything, and we couldn't go anywhere, to me it was a real eye-opener. It was a real epiphany. I mean, I had a hard time in COVID myself personally. I was furloughed from my job, and then my cat died, and then about 3 or 4 weeks into COVID, my dad died from COVID-19. He actually caught the virus, passed away, died at home on his own. We couldn't even have a funeral. All of those stories that you heard about people going through those things, that was us, trying to deal with that. And it knocked me for absolute six. And I'll be honest with you, the only thing that saved me through all of that was my mate Pete. Because Pete, I'd met Pete some years before. He gave me a job working in the print business with him. And we'll talk a little bit about the print business if we've got time for it in a bit. And
maybe I'm quite interested in getting to the dog shark bit, but I feel like you might well be getting towards that. Yeah.
We're getting there. Yeah, this is all connected. Believe me, we're getting to that. My mate Pete had given me a job some years before, but what he'd also done is give me a hell of an education about music. Peter's previous life incarnations had him running sound and lighting rigs for some of the biggest bands in the world. People like Annie Lennox and Run Rig and bands like that. And his knowledge about music was unlike anybody else's I'd ever met before. And he schooled me to a lot of amazing musicians I'd simply just never heard of. And so one of the guys that he really educated me about and who became a massive influence on me was Robin Trower. If you know about guitar, you don't know Robin Trower?
No, not yet.
Oh, you need to.
Right, okay.
You need to. If you're going to check out the other stuff I've talked about earlier, check out Robin Trower. Robin Trower is the closest living thing you'll get to Jimi Hendrix. And that's not doing him justice, really. That's like, he's not a copycat Hendrix. He's his own thing for definite. But you will have heard his songs. You just maybe not have heard of him. And tonally, he has one of the most iconic guitar tones you'll ever hear. It's just incredible. And all it is the man's fingers, a Stratocaster, and a Marshall amp. Right. And there's very little in between. But what you hear is unlike anybody else that you'll hear. And so going into lockdown, we had tickets to go and see him. And it got cancelled. Of course, everything was getting cancelled. All the concerts were being cancelled. And we're talking about April 2020. So it was right at the beginning of the first lockdown, And I was bummed out because, like I said, my father had passed from COVID and I was dealing with all that right in the middle of all that. And I was supposed to have gone to this Trower concert with my friend Pete. And it got cancelled, and I was just bummed out. So my mate Pete came up with this absolutely genius idea. He said, you know what? He says, why don't we do a virtual gig? I says, what do you mean, a virtual gig? He says, well, we've got a bunch of pals all over the world who all love the same music we do. We're all on lockdown. We've got nothing better to do on a Saturday night. We can't go out anywhere and do anything. He says, why don't I put a video together of a good band? I'll send it around everybody, and we'll all sit down together at the same time, and we'll watch this concert together, and we'll talk on WhatsApp, and we'll chat. And honestly, that became our Saturday night every week for 2.5 years.
Wow.
Through the whole of lockdown, we did not miss a single Saturday. Eventually, some of us started to get busy again and get involved in other things. And for me, I made the decision the first time we came out of the first lockdown that I wasn't going to waste any more time not doing what I know I should have been doing all along, and that was playing in a fucking good band. Yeah. Because I'd put it off for far too long. But everything that I'd done before had taught me all the things that I knew I wanted to do and what not to do this time around. And I feel that when I've done it this time, I've made sure I've done it all the right way. So coming out of that lockdown two and a bit years ago, I put an ad out on Facebook local musicians group, Right. I just said, I tell a lie. I was flirting with a mate of mine and his band, he was the drummer in a very, very good Foo Fighters tribute band. They wanted to start a grunge tribute band.
Right.
And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I'm kind of into that sort of thing. And they were going to get me in on that. I was going to come and sing and play second guitar on it. And I'll be honest with you, we got in a group chat and it died a death before we even got into a rehearsal together because there was arguments over who would play what guitar solo straight away.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm like, fuck this, right?
Yeah.
Not getting involved in this sort of thing. This is exactly what I don't want to be doing. So, because I'd been there, I'd done that, all that before, So I put this, literally that day, I put this ad out on Facebook saying, look, no egos, no mucking about. I've got this vision for a blues band. I just want some cool old dudes who want to come and play some cool blues. I want a bass player and a drummer who's up for it. And do you know what? I got really, really lucky because the first guy who got in touch with me was a drummer called Matt, and that was it. He was the man straight away. The first guy, literally.
Wow.
I got a bass player interested pretty quick, and I got us into a rehearsal studio, and me and Matt, it was like that. It was instantaneous. We just knew. He knew I was doing what he wanted to do, and I knew he was doing what I wanted a drummer to do, if you get what I mean.
Nice.
It just, straight away, you just had that feeling. It took us a little while to get the bass player right. We went through 2 or 3 before we found Simon, who's our bass player now. But I always remember Simon walked in to rehearsal. We actually had a couple of guys booked to come and play, and this one guy came, and he was a really good player, really professional. He knew all the right bass lines and had all the right gear and all that. But personality there was just something lacking.
Right.
Then Simon walks in and plugs his bass in, and the first thing he plays was a riff from a song by a band called 10 Years After. Have you ever heard of 10 Years After?
No.
Alvin Lee, the guitar player Alvin Lee.
Right.
Yeah, you gotta check him out. He's like the precursor. Complete blues rock, but he's like the precursor to your Eddie Van Halen's. He was playing fast, like really intricate guitar licks, decades before people like Eddie Van Halen and stuff like that. But without Alvin Lee, you wouldn't have got those types of players because he was really pioneering that type of aggressive playing. But
like an early shredder.
Amazing. Yeah, exactly. So, and Simon walking in the door, first lick he played was from an Alvin Lee 10 Years After song, and I was just like, man, you got the job straight away. And
nice.
it just really, really clicked. And so the three of us, we flirted with the idea of getting a keys player in, but the three of us just gelled so well and found our sort of groove so quickly.
I'm just trying to think about that with reference to what I've heard already, from what I've heard of the album, which is a twice run through, and I can see why you don't think you need a keyboard player. I can easily see that.
Well, yeah, it was. I'll be honest with you, there was a little journey of discovery with us early on. When we first got together, the idea was we were going to be a very trad blues band, a very traditional blues band, and what became very apparent very, very quickly was that wasn't really the sort of band we should be. We tried to be, and we tried to engage with the trad blues scene. It didn't like us. The people involved in the trad blues scene around our region didn't seem to want us involved.
And what is your region? Because I don't think we've covered that. Just briefly, where are you based?
Yorkshire.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and there's a great blues scene around Yorkshire. Lots of great blues players, lots of great blues bands. But I'll be honest with you, there's some players in amongst that scene that carry a little bit of ego and don't do themselves any justice in doing so. They have their little circles, their little cliques, and it was apparent from very early on we weren't particularly welcome in that, and didn't bother us in the slightest, because there was a couple of moments that were really sort of turning points for us in finding our direction, finding where we wanted to go with things. The first one was we played a gig. I think it was our third gig, in a place called the Church House in Sheffield. Great venue in Sheffield, town centre. And there was a guy who was so well known around the whole Sheffield area for being a champion promoter of the blues scene. He was a guy called Martin Bedford. Now, you can't... Martin Bedford was a legend in Sheffield. One for putting on gigs for decades. He was putting gigs on around Sheffield, but he was also really highly regarded for his artwork. If you got a Martin Bedford gig, he did you a poster, and that was why you did a Martin Bedford gig, because you got the best, coolest fucking poster from doing that gig. I've got 2 of them framed on my wall right here next to me.
Wow.
And tragically, less than a year later, Martin Bedford passed away. He died of cancer. But in the time he was around, he gave us a couple of gigs, and I'm so grateful. I'll be forever grateful that he did that, because the very first time he put us on was at the Church House in Sheffield. And that night, he opened my eyes to what we really should be doing, because we went on stage and we did our thing, and we thought we were being a trad blues band, and that's what we thought we were doing, and we were playing what we thought was trad blues. And we came off stage that first set, and I always remember Martin came up to me and said, "Man, you guys are a great blues rock band." And I'd never thought about us that way.
Right.
I'd honestly never thought about it. And I'll be honest with you, I'd been trying to make my guitar sound and my vocal sound trad blues. So I was playing with Stratocasters and Fender amps and just going for that sort of sound and clean, sort of Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of guitar tones. And I'd always kind of felt like I was fighting my way to it. And as soon as Martin said that, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, do you know what? We need to free ourselves up here and do what we're supposed to be doing, because both myself, Matt, the drummer, Simon, the bass player, had all these great rock influences, but we were just trying to force ourselves into this trad blues sort of bracket, and it just didn't feel right. Then, so taking that little bit of advice from Matt, well, it wasn't really advice, it was just an observation from him, but it clicked. Taking that from him into the next few gigs, we just started to free ourselves up with our sound and our attack and our style. And then we got a gig at a great little venue in Skipton. It's called the Mess Room. Dark, smoky, low ceiling, really close, tight little venue, sweating, really heavy, hot venue. And we had it was the first time I built a set to get people on their feet.
Nice.
We played a lot of blues places. We played like the Cleveland Bay, where they do blues at the Bay every month there. And they make everybody sit down, and nobody's allowed to talk in between songs, and everybody has to just sit there and wait till the song to finish and then politely clap. And they even sell T-shirts that say, "If you talk while the band's on, you're not welcome here." That sort of thing. And we've been playing those sorts of venues. And then we played the Mess Room, and like I said, I built that set deliberately to get people on their feet, and it was the first gig we played where we had them up and dancing.
Nice.
And we had the best party gig we'd had to that day, and that was it. From that point on, it was like, right, lads, we're going for the fun, we're going for the power, we're going for we just want to get people moving, we want to get them reacting. So that just straight away opened us up to trying a whole bunch of different things. And so it was around that time we decided we wanted to start writing our own stuff. We were established as a covers band. We were out there booking gigs. They were paying us a decent amount of money. So we had some income coming into the band to do some stuff with. And we decided, from that point, we wanted to start creating our own stuff.
So what we're talking about, like 2 years ago, a year ago, something like that?
So in terms of writing stuff, maybe a year and a half.
Right.
Ago. And I gave us a couple of easy wins, because obviously I've been writing songs for decades, and I had a couple of songs in the bag that I thought they'd just suit us with what we're now trying to do. And so we got them in to the set, and they worked really well. And we adapted them to this band, so they was best suited to this band. And then we went on from there. But I kind of had this in mind all along since I started the band. But again, one of the things I'd learned from years previous is that if you're going to write something, if you're going to create something together, you have to have a freedom. Everybody has to have a freedom. But everybody, yeah. Again, my time sitting behind a desk as a manager taught me as well that everybody has to have a job, and you can't overlap.
Right.
So what I set out in this band was the drummer writes the drums, bass player writes the bass, I sing and play guitar, so that's my job. And that, that caused a little bit of tension, a little bit of friction early on, but very quickly the guys got right on board with that. And do you know what happened from that moment on? The songs came thick and fast.
Nice.
I would come into rehearsal with 1 5-second riff, and 20 minutes later we'd have a fully structured, fully written song, because the drummer would just drop in and do his bit. Matty would just find immediately what he thought was the best thing to do for that. Simon, same on the bass. And I found these guys who were great players who could just on the spot come up with something that just worked.
Yeah.
And after that, the way we wrote songs together just was so organic and so free, and just there was no nobody trying to tell each other what to do. It was just like, that's what you want to do on the drums, you do that. That's what you want to do on the bass, you do that. That's, I'll do what I want to do with the guitar and vocals. But it all just worked, and everybody was really happy with what they were hearing each other was doing. I mean, like I say, I've worked with so many bands in the past where we written songs and all that, and the most talented band I ever worked with in terms of the ability was the band out in the Middle East. And we tried to write a song once, and it all went horribly wrong, because the rapper wanted to write the drum parts, the drummer wanted to write the keyboard parts, the bass player wanted to write guitar parts, and it just didn't work. So, yeah, my experience in management in business has led me to manage this band as well as I possibly can, and the guys have really helped me with this. They've really come along with the journey and the idea and the vision. And when it came to being creative, because we'd done the work to get the band as a covers band working, functionally we understood each other, musically we had that communication, we had that language. If I needed to explain a part to the bass player or the drummer, they would understand what I was saying. And we kind of delayed writing stuff until that was in place. So when we had that, when we started to write stuff, it would just click really quick. And so by something like, by the beginning of this year, I had it in mind that this was the year we were going to do an album. And we'd promoted ourselves in the year before with some very sort of traditional looking blues band type graphics and promotional sort of things. And the band name was the Dog Shark Blues Band. At the beginning of this year, I shortened that to just Dog Shark Blues. And I completely changed the whole branding and image and look of the band, the style of the band, the website, everything. Because, like I say, the 10 years I was off sitting behind a desk, not being in bands, I was learning about technology and websites and e-commerce and business and finance and marketing and all that stuff. All stuff that's now really helping us do this. At the beginning of this year, I kind of had the vision that this was going to be the year when we would grow into an original band. And I kind of had it in mind that when we did it, we would just drop the blues part of the name and just go out there as Dog Shark. Because what I really wanted to do, and what we all wanted to do after we'd all discussed it, was the original stuff just had to be as whatever we wanted to do. It didn't want to just be blues, didn't want to just be this, didn't want to just be that. It wanted to just be the stuff we really enjoyed playing. And that's why when you listen to the album, there's blues on there, but there's a lot more.
There is a lot more. There is a lot more. Because I listened through it.
Yeah.
And then I listened through it again, taking some notes, if you will.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really interesting where you started from and what you talked about with your influences like as a teenager. Because what did I wrote? Where did I write? Right. So have you got like a visual? Because have you got a copy of the album right there? Because like you were saying, the image, the album cover.
Yeah, I've got this here. This is actually the this is the what do they call it? The proof copy. So when you send off to have CDs duplicated and made, you have to get it signed off. You have to do a proof.
Can you
copy.
show it? There we go. Yeah.
So this is the proof copy.
And what about and the back? Yeah, all the inside, yeah.
Yeah. And then the back there, yeah.
Great imagery.
It's really very cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a story behind that.
And not very, and it's sort of hard to date in a way. Because you could look at that and you could think it's from the 70s or any time, really. It's an interesting one. Go on then.
Would you like me to explain it? Because
briefly,
there was a definite vision and journey behind all this. So as you'll know, if you go through the tracks on the album, there's quite a few tracks on there that have a modern or technological or futuristic sort of theme. We write songs about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We write songs about spaceships. We write songs about cryptocurrency. And again, some stuff you won't find trad blues bands singing about. And the reason that happened was one of the things I consciously wanted to do was I wanted to connect us to now. I wanted to connect us creatively to the world we're in right now. I wanted to talk about things that were happening to us and everybody around us and the people in the world right now. And one of the big things that everybody's been influenced by now and affected by is artificial intelligence and what's happening with that. And there's a big cryptocurrency has become like this huge financial sort of impact on the world now, where so much of the world's finances are transacting that way as opposed to the more traditional ways. Now there's a lot of people who are pro or anti that sort of thing, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of negativity, but there's a lot of people who are making fortunes for themselves as well. It's a very crazy world we're living in these days. And I'm hugely influenced by a science fiction writer called Isaac Asimov. Have you ever read any Isaac Asimov stuff?
No.
Okay, so if you've ever seen a movie called I, Robot with Will Smith.
Right.
Yeah.
I've heard of it. I remember it, but I didn't watch it. But go on, yeah.
So that was based on a collection of short stories written by Isaac Asimov. Right. You might have seen another movie with Robin Williams in called Bicentennial Man, about a robot that becomes human, basically.
Right.
Again, a classic sort of Asimov story. Asimov was a science fiction writer. In fact, more recently as well, Apple made a new TV series called Foundation, which was based on Asimov's most iconic works. But Isaac Asimov was writing just the most epic science fiction, like in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and going into the 60s and 70s. Now, he conceptualized so many of the things in his fiction that we take for granted today as just commonplace household technology. The idea of personalized robots that live in your house and do things for you. I've got a robot vacuum cleaner downstairs that cleans the entire bottom floor of my house that I called Robbie. And when I want to activate it, I tell Alexa to activate Robbie. In fact, she's probably just done that now. And I called it Robbie because one of Asimov's first books was him writing about how at the turn of the millennium, every household would have a robot who lived there that would do household chores for them. And the story focuses on one family with a robot called Robbie. And so a huge influence of Asimov on me. And if you recognize Asimov's work, what you'll probably also recognise with the album cover is that this typeface that we've used for the band name,
Right.
I borrowed directly from all of Isaac Asimov's novels that were published in the 1970s.
Right.
It's actually a font called Cable Black. It's actually a like a default typeface. It's been used by a bunch of people on album covers and stuff over the years, but for me, the most iconic use of it was on Asimov's book covers. So that was what I wanted to kind of emulate with this album cover.
Right.
Even down to the font I used for the album title was the same Helvetica font that he used in his book titles. The title of the album, which is Earth is Not Enough, is a play on another collection of Asimov's short stories, which was titled Earth is Room Enough. And I took that particular title from that collection of short stories because in those short stories, Asimov writes a bunch of different stories, but in many of those stories, he references something called the multivac, which is a computer that effectively, it was like him conceptualizing the internet decades before the internet was technologically even conceived, in the sense that this computer existed throughout the galaxy, which was populated by humanity throughout the galaxy. Everybody had a personal terminal, they would interact with it, they would use it to communicate and find information that they needed and do all the day-to-day things that they wanted to do in terms of information exchange. So there was so much of our modern world in those books already. And Asimov was like this prophetic sort of like genius, came up with these ideas long before they even existed. And I just thought that resonated really well with where we are in society now with technology and so on. And that book title, to me, though, to say Earth is room enough in 2024 when we've got an 8.5 billion world population, it's kind of counterintuitive to how most people probably feel in this day and age, in that perhaps the Earth is not room enough for us all. So that seemed to make sense to me to be the title of the album. So yeah, all ties in. Asimov, science fiction, modern world we live in, technology, the sheer frustration of it all, you know, and just wanting to express that. And so part of what I did in creating some of the elements of both the music of this album and the artwork for it was to use artificial intelligence. Now, I might get some criticism for this because
I did wonder, looking at that album cover, whether it had been AI generated or not.
Absolutely, and I've no problems with admitting that at all, because with what you can do with artificial intelligence these days, there's an argument out there that it's over. Well, I mean, the song on the album, it's called AI's Rise. Okay, now I wrote that song because I wanted to write a song with a funky backbeat that talked about the dangers of artificial intelligence and it replacing humanity. So, but what I wanted to do is, I guess I wanted to inject some irony into it at the same time. So it's me singing on the song, and it's the band playing on the song.
Right.
But the lyrics, I used artificial intelligence to help me write the lyrics. I asked AI to write me some lyrics for a song about AI replacing humanity, and it did.
So who is it speaking at the beginning and at the end then?
Okay, I'll get to that. So the bits you hear me singing, I took that from AI, and then I just tweaked it a little bit to just make it fit the music, fit the song. So it's kind of a collaboration between me and AI, the lyrics part. Now the speech, as you mentioned, there's an introduction speech at the beginning of the song, and then the speech continues at the end and kind of wraps the song up. And that is 100% artificial intelligence in both oration and creation. I literally just typed the command in, write me a 2-minute long speech about the dangers of artificial intelligence.
Wow.
And then it output the words. And then at the bottom of the window where it output the words, there was a little speaker button. And when you click that, that's what you hear. it wrote it, and then it spoke it. And I'd literally just captured the audio, and in the studio, me and JB, the engineer, our producer, we just took it and we chopped it around a little bit just to make it kind of fit the timing of the music. But yeah, what you're hearing is effectively a speech about the dangers of artificial intelligence, entirely written by artificial intelligence.
Yeah, right, yeah. In my notes...
Deep stuff, right?
I also put... So, another strong riff at the beginning of that one. There's some really good, strong riffs at the beginning of some of these songs. There's a little bit in that almost has a sort of Kayas sounding bit to it as well.
Yeah, I keep hearing that. You know, I've never really listened to them. I've heard of them, of course, but I'd never really listened to them that much. I think what you're probably hearing more than anything is the guitar tone.
Throughout the whole album, it's nudging right up next to sort of sludgy, dirty blues, in it, dirty rock, sludgy, slightly stoner-esque, but not quite. It's not quite there, but it's going in that direction. Hence, I mean, it comes out more. There's just one particular bit in that AI's Rise that I just thought is a little bit like the opening track of "And the Circus Leaves Town," which is quite a famous Kaya song.
The thing that you probably miss when you listen to that song is that is actually a blues turnaround. That whole song.
Of course,
Structurally, it's a blues song, but one of the things we've consciously tried to do when we've written the blues track is just do something a bit different than what perhaps has been done with the blues before. So AI's Rise is a good example of that. Definitely. I mean, the whole AI thing and the speech and all that's very much a distraction away from the fact that at the core, it's a blues turnaround that you're hearing as the song plays through.
You can hear the bluesiness of all the songs. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, right? Let's get the album done, because I want to talk through some of the notes. So let's really focus. So, right, the Earth is Not Enough Room is the name of the album, and what I've gleaned so far is it's your first studio album, then, for Dog Shark.
It is, yeah. It's not the first time
when is it released?
Been in a studio. Okay, so official release date is still to be confirmed. If you know anything about music publishing, it takes a little bit of time to get all the copyright and the publishing worked out and the licensing for broadcasting and all that, if you want to be able to get paid for your music being broadcast. And this day and age, digital distribution and all that, you need to make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row when it comes to that sort of stuff. So we're doing that right now, but we needed a bit of hand funding it. Now, we don't have a record label, we don't have any kind of management or anything like that. It's literally just me doing all of this, and the guys in the band who help me, do the creative parts of it. So, we needed a little bit of help from our pals and our fans just to help fund that part. So we put this CD out as a pre-release, advanced limited run. And we've sold that many of them. It's not as limited as it used to be because we had to make some more. We've been blown away by how well received this has been so far. I put a website together and just started running some marketing for it, just to get the word out that this album was available on CD. We're also taking pre-orders for the digital download version.
Right.
And the plan is this. The official launch date is going to be when the album releases in full on all the streaming platforms.
Right.
But that's only going to happen once we've got all the licensing squared away. That's in progress. Literally as we're speaking, that's not happening. But the plan around that in terms of timing is to release a few singles first to streaming and then the full album. But the digital download version will be made available to all those who've pre-ordered it on the day the first single is released.
Right.
So we're getting to the point where we're about to release a single on streaming. Then we might do 2 or 3 more. Then we'll release the full album. So officially, until the full album's released on streaming, it's still pre-release, if you get what I mean. And I'll be honest with you, it seems to be really helping in terms of creating a bit of a buzz, a bit of a build-up, a bit of anticipation. as that sense of getting something before everybody else. Everybody likes to, that sort of thing. So it's definitely helping us out. But the most pleasing thing about this so far is just how much people seem to be enjoying it when they are hearing it. The feedback we've had so far has been just marvelous, just wonderful.
So, are you willing to go through the songs with me a little bit?
Absolutely,
just briefly with each one. So we've got track 1, Sun Going Down, John the Revelator, which almost sort of fools you because it kind of starts with some trad style slide, and you're like, oh, okay, it's going to be like this, is it? Right, and then hits you with that sort of real sludgy slide sound, and comes in, dealing with almost sort of like religious aspects by the sounds of it, touching on religious ideas. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So what that song is basically a collection of covers.
Right.
But done in a way that is just 100% us.
Right.
And what you said about the way that it starts is exactly what our intention was. It was like, here's some old school blues. Guess what? We can do that, but this is what we're really about. And that's what the song builds into. And the first section of the song, what we really call the intro part, where you hear that first vocal part about Satan at the door, is an old, basically a workaround of Robert Johnson's lyrics from Me and the Devil Blues.
Right.
But the delivery of it is entirely inspired by a band called The Tea Party. If you've never heard these guys, write these down. Another one you absolutely have to check out. One of my all-time favourite bands. I travelled from the UK to Canada just to go and watch these guys in a little dive bar in some outskirts town of Toronto. They're absolutely amazing. Imagine if you combined the Doors with Led Zeppelin, you'd have the Tea Party. Right. And one of their songs is called Sun Going Down. And the intro to that song is very similar to what you hear at the intro. So I tributed the intro to this song to them. The rest of the song, if you're familiar with Son House and John the Revelator, the original song, I don't think it was Son House. I think was it Billy Dixon? I can't remember. But the one everybody remembers was Son House. But that song's been covered time and time and time again. The one that's probably closest to what you hear on our version is the version that Curtis Stigers put out. Yeah, I think he did it for the soundtrack for, what was the biker TV show? Sons of Anarchy, about the biker gang.
Right.
Now, we're actually quite popular with the biker community, so we kind of built that into our set as a way to give those guys a little bit of something. But we took kind of what Curtis Stigers did and just did our own thing with it, and then we bolted those two things together to create this hugely dramatic, religious, bluesy, grungy, slidey thing. And yeah, we love it.
So then moving into track 2, Blockchain. Part of what I've got written here is Van Halen light sounding intro riff, sort of Van Halen light. Very much like we've already talked about very briefly the modern context to the lyrics, and then a very sort of Van Halen-y / Motley Crue riff throughout the rest of the song.
So
I'm saying those things, but like you say, very, very bluesy. Always with a bluesy context. But this is a little bit of what I'm hearing. I'm like, oh, okay, that wouldn't sound too out of place, like maybe on Dr. Feelgood or something. But yeah.
Yeah. So that riff, I don't know. I wanted to write a song, and that riff came to me about an hour before I was due to leave the house for a rehearsal. And but that was it. It was just the riff. And I got in rehearsal and I played it to the guys. And 20 minutes later, the song was written.
Nice.
And I came away and wrote the lyrics. And I just happened to be, I do a little bit of crypto trading. I'm involved in a lot of that sort of thing. I lost a bunch of money on a type of crypto called XRP that week. It was just in my mind, and I just thought, wouldn't it be cool to write like a sort of a classic rock style song about something that's so modern,
modern, yeah.
So in my mind, I guess I kind of felt like it was kind of like an AC/DC style.
Okay, yeah.
Rock and roll, especially through the verses, it's just very straight on the beat, rock, but I'm singing about losing your ass on cryptocurrency and all of that. And I mean, I writing the lyrics to that one was like a word salad. I kind of used the David Bowie method, where you just write a bunch of words that are related to a subject, and then you find a place to put them all in the song, and the lyrics came together about as quickly as the song. Nice. The rest of the song did. So a real easy win, that one, but so much fun to play. And we always save that one for the end of our live sets whenever we play out. We've sort of fallen into the habit now, when we get to the end of the night, we typically get asked for an encore, and because we're a blues and a rock band, we give everybody the choice. What do you want? You want a bit of blues, or do you want a bit of rock? They always want a rock, so we give them Blockchain, and
nice.
It does the job.
Nice. And so we've talked about AI's rise. So we'll refer to previous bits of the podcast for that. Track 4, Perfect Evening. Now it's really okay. So when we first started this, I had to stop myself from looking over at these notes, because the very first words I put after the track title was, "Hello, Eddie Vedder."
I'll take that as a huge compliment. Yeah.
And then interesting opening acoustic guitar riff with that opening guitar riff is almost sounds like it's a sample, because it almost sounds like it hasn't finished, and then it starts again, and then it starts again, and then. Yeah.
But that is 100% how it's played live. That's just how I wrote it. That's what I wanted. I wanted that kind of bounce against the beat. You talked about Pantera earlier, and one of the things I always remember learning about Pantera, if you remember, Pantera's most iconic song was a song called War.
Yes.
Yeah? Everybody knows that one. Big, fat, heavy riff. But what people often don't understand from a technical, musical point of view is what you're hearing is a guitar part that sits so far back from the beat. It gives it that grind, that absolute raw. That's all over my playing, all over the thing. Matty is so great on the drums and just locking it down solid. He gives me absolute freedom to be lazy as fuck with my guitar playing and sloppy with the beat. So you get songs like that where, the guitar part is just sitting around the beat and off the beat, and just not, it doesn't have to be on the one all the time. So you get that kind of choppy guitar. But if you pay attention to that song, the whole song is literally 2 chords.
Right.
It sounds relatively complex, and there's a middle 8 section, and the outro of the song has a very classic rock sort of feel to it. But for the most part, the song is just 2 chords. It's E and G. The rhythm kind of distracts you from the simplicity.
So then into track 5, Mind of Man, which for some reason I've written, because it's sort of almost sort of ZZ Toppy sort of feel to it. And then lyrics about man stuff.
Man stuff. It's a subject that often people are a little bit afraid to perhaps talk about these days, men being men. We'll talk about everything, but that one, that's kind of how I was feeling at the time. We're all married guys, we have that life experience. I've been married over 20 years, and the guys similarly. And that song, again, was another one that musically came together in like half an hour, 20 minutes. It just came from the riff, and structurally it just all fell into place. We got to one bit and it was like, right, let's do this, that works, right, next bit, and it all came together nice and fast. And then when it came to writing the lyrics for it, it was just kind of how I was feeling that week. I think I'd probably had a bit of a set to with the missus about how much time I was spending with the band, and it was just kind of that sort of feeling like, listen, I just want to have a good time. But yeah, the vibe of the song we were kind of going for was very much that sort of southern blues rock groove, that kind of Stevie Ray Vaughan, Leonard Skinner, ZZ Top, kind of early ZZ Top kind of riff and groove. And yeah, we liked that one. And I actually had the producer cut all the swearing out of that one. So if we do end up with something on the radio, it might be that one, or maybe one or two of the others. But yeah, we like that one. And then the interesting thing about that song, the guitar solo in that one, I was really struggling with the tone on it, the sound on it, and the delivery, and I wasn't happy at all with how it was in the studio. But it was one of those things where I felt like if I kept going back and trying to do it again, it would only get worse. And studio time is expensive.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention as well, the guy who produced this album was a guy called J.B. Pillion. He's a French guy, and he works out of a studio, thankfully, which is about four minutes drive from my house.
Nice.
Here in the same town. And it's a brilliant studio. There's some great bands recorded there over the years, and he's an absolutely brilliant producer. And I kept saying, look, I think we need to put something on that solo that makes it stand out a little bit, and maybe make some of the the duff notes in it kind of hide them a little bit. And I had a guitar pedal on my pedal board. I kind of emulated a Leslie speaker sound, and I said, well, why don't we reamp it through that pedal and give it kind of a Leslie sound? And he says, well, we can do even better than that. Why don't we put it through a Leslie? So he happened to have two Leslie speakers there in the studio. Do you know what a Leslie speaker does?
No, what's that do then?
So typically it was used with like the old Hammond organs, but it's a speaker that rotates inside a cabinet, and it creates that really that whirly sound, exactly. So that's what we did. We reamped it from the desk out to an actual Leslie speaker, mic'd the whole thing up, and recorded it back in. So when you hear that guitar solo on the record and it sounds like a Leslie, that's because it's actually being played and recorded back through a Leslie speaker. It wasn't played live that way, but through clever production and trickery, we captured that sound. And I think it actually tied that song together. It just finished it off nicely.
Track 6, Hold My Coat. I've got strong bass during the verse. Your man kept that bass line going, which was really nice. I've got Zakk Wylde feel to the solo and the backing of the solo as well. Because there's a fair bit of shred on that solo.
A little bit, yeah. I do occasionally get a bit carried away with the old fretboard. I try to keep things as melodious and as sort of like as interesting as possible, but every now and then my fingers get carried away and shred a little bit. But that song's an old song. That song I've had around for quite a few years. And again, was one of the first ones I introduced to this band because I just had it in the bag already.
Right.
But the guys they'd added their bits to it and made it their own, and it's very much our own song now. But yeah, it was just big, fat, heavy riff in drop D, and it's got some nice, powerful drums, and it's just a real sort of belligerent sort of song about just being your own person and doing your own thing, and not letting anybody else hold you back or influence you negatively. And then when you want to show off a bit, just make sure you've got someone around to hold your coat for you.
Track 7, which took me a little while into it to get what it was about, but Too Sweet brackets Type 2 Blues. So first thing I've got written here is John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, and then I've also got written middle-aged lyrics with a smiley face because I got what it was about after a while.
Yeah, so the clue is in the title, Type 2 Blues. It's a song about being Type 2 diabetic. It's a blues song. It's a bit of a cheeky sort of attack on that. I mean, the reason we wrote that was just over a year ago. I was diagnosed as type 2 diabetic, and I put myself there. I did it to myself through bad habits and bad eating and all that. Now I'm thankful that a little over a year later, I've just completed remission, and I'm now completely cured of type 2 diabetes. It's gone. Don't have to deal with it anymore. I'm on no medication for it whatsoever. I'm on some other things for other things, but as far as the type 2 diabetes is concerned, it's gone, and I'm very, very grateful about that. But when it was still very much a thing in my life, and I was dealing with it every day, taking medication and having to deal with all the things you do, I wrote a song about it, and it's about what you can't have, all the nice things, what you have to give up.
Yeah.
But a bit of tongue in cheek. And as you'll probably noticed as well, there's quite a lot of humour throughout the whole album.
Well, yeah, because then we move into track 8, Cliche, and I've got written "Hello Black Label Society." Do you know that band? Do you know Zakk Wylde's band?
I do. Zakk Wylde's Black Label Society. Do you know what? I won't name names, but there are some very specific bands that came to mind that inspired me to write that song.
Right.
I'd seen some bands recently.
It was my comment was more musically rather than them being possibly a target for your lyrics. But go on.
I mean, if you listen to the lyrics, it's specifically talking about bands that write. That you just
cliches,
when writing lyrics in their songs.
Yeah.
There's so many of them out there, and you know what? They're doing well. They're going great guns. They're selling albums. They're doing fine, and more power to them, absolutely. But oh my God, there are some lazy fucking people out there when it comes to writing lyrics. Just try and have an original thought. Now here's a bit of a left field thing for you. Part of the inspiration for that is Eminem. I was a huge hip-hop and rap fan as much as I was a rock fan. Back in the early days of hip-hop, 90s going into the 2000s, guys like, the Notorious B.I.G. and Eminem and Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre and all of those guys. But Eminem specifically used to really drive it home about, trying to have some originality in your lyrics, trying to have some original ideas and some speak from a real place, speak from a real position, and that's all I wanted to do. That's all I wanted to say with that song was just be true, man. Just say something real,
Yeah.
And would you believe it or not, Amazon have just turned up. Right, somebody will get that. But yeah, that's what that song's about. Bands who write shit lyrics.
And then track 9, Through-gether. A sort of ode to love. An ode to a partnership. Perfect Evening and Through-gether. I wrote them basically about my wife and I.
And then
lyrically.
Funny you mentioned at the beginning as well about the concert you went to see too, because I've got written here Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue.
Yeah. Well, I found a way to get all my influences in there somewhere, but this song, this is the song that everybody's hearing on the promo that we've been putting out there at the moment,
Right,
a little
okay.
45-second clip, because it's a particularly strong point on the album, I think. Now, it's called Through-gether because obviously the hook line in the song is that we've been through a lot together, but the phrase Through-gether is something my wife said once. She's a beautiful, beautiful girl, and I'm far too lucky to have somebody as wonderful as her. But being from Bulgaria, English isn't her first language, but she speaks better English than most people I know, their whole lives. But she beautifully said one day that she was trying to say that we'd been through a lot together, but she was feeling a little emotion. Her words came out when she tried to say it. She said, "We've been through together," and that word stuck with us. We've used that word for 10 years ever since. And so when I wrote that song, that was what I had in my head. That's why the lyrics say there's only one word I can think of
to describe all this. Yeah.
Describe what we've been we've been through a lot together. And then I don't actually say it in the song.
No,
but I titled the song with that word. But that musically, that song was kind of an inspiration. It was one that I wrote while the band was already going, but I had that whole song in my head, and I wrote it at home. I demoed it at home, and I took it into the rehearsal studio with the guys, and I said, "Look, this is the song." And I didn't do too much for the drums and the bass. I just let the guys do their thing. But I had the whole song in my head, tracked, lyrics, vocals, guitars, all of that, before I even showed it to the band. So it came out just so perfect the way I wanted it to hear it in my head. Really happy with that song. That's one of my favourite songs on the album.
Track 10. You don't like going to work, do you?
Yeah, no, I've had all the experiences you could imagine with work over the years because I had that early life experience being out there as a musician and the freedom and the partying and all that, and then I threw myself behind a desk working in tech companies for the best part of 2 decades. I had every kind of job experience you could possibly imagine. So yeah, Tired, track 10 is very much an opinion about working in those types of environments where you have a boss to please, you have colleagues to manage, to deal with, to work alongside, to other people's bullshit that you just lose patience with. And I'm very much at that point in my life now where I'm done with that. I am done with that because I don't do that anymore. I very much am a man of my own destiny now with all the things I'm doing, whether that's the band, my businesses, my career, whatever. And I just had to speak on that in some way. And when I came up with that, again, the song, the riff, the music was another one of those ones that just dropped together real quick in rehearsal. And then it had that aggression that inspired the attitude for the lyrics and the vocals.
And I've got New Nor Ending written on that for Tired. The end.
Sorry?
New Nor ended. New Nor Beckencore from Extreme.
Okay.
It's got
you
that
mean
sort of feel
kind
at the ending.
Yeah, the kind of muted kind of yeah. I deliberately put that in there. In my mind, I was kind of hitting a metal sort of feel with that song. It was a heavy riff with a bluesy, a very straight rock chorus, but then I wanted to up the tempo for the lead break. So you get that little interlude leading into the lead break where I just felt like I needed an excuse to just do something a little bit metal, So I did that, and then I just thought that wraps the song up nice to do that too. So
I mean, the whole album's got a bluesy metal feel to it for sure.
Yeah.
Right. So track 11, Drop That Attitude. You need a woman that understands you. I'm hearing Zakk Wylde again. I'm hearing Hello Pantera bass. I'm hearing something in the solo that was almost sort of Megadethy. It was almost like an Egyptian solo, an Egyptian scale or Phrygian scale or something you were using.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. If you go back to Blockchain, the guitar solo in Blockchain has that kind of Eastern sort of Arabic scale vibe to it. And again, the solo in Drop That Attitude is but again that for me kind of harks back to the influence of the band I mentioned earlier called the Tea Party.
Right.
You or your listeners, you've got to check that band out. Absolutely amazing band. Their second album, The Edges of Twilight, is just unbelievably awesome album. Blues rock with all this Arabic Eastern influence, instrumentation in there, all of that. And so there's a lot when you hear that kind of thing on our work, the influence for that came from those guys, but obviously I've metaled it up or rocked it up. I don't want to overdo the whole metal thing with this, talking about this album, because we don't really think about it that way at all. It's heavy rock as far as I'm concerned, where it goes to in terms of going down that road, with some slight hints at metal every now and then.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
But Drop That Attitude is actually the oldest song on the album. That song is well over a decade old. I wrote that many, many years ago. It's changed a little bit with this band as we brought it in and made it our own. But yeah, I wrote that song in my early days of marriage, should we say, where perhaps you weren't quite as good at marriage as you are when you've been married for 20 years. Believe it or not, like me and our lass, you know, we passed all that kind of thing now, but the life experience was had, and I wrote a song about it, and it's got a cool riff.
Yeah,
So,
and I'm aware that there's a fine line to be drawn with mentioning all these other bands. It's not. I'm by no means trying to say you're copying them or anything. I'm just saying, that I can hear a little bit of that in a complimentary way.
Do you know what? I
like,
don't mind that in one little bit. Like for me, I'm always interested to know who a band's influences. I always am, and so I've absolutely no qualms about saying. And I've said this to the guys all the time. Every time we write a song, I will say, "Oh, that bit, I want to do this because it sounds like this band that I really love." But we wrote the piece. You know, I wrote the riff. Or
you definitely did. Yeah.
But it makes us happy that it reminds us of our favourite things and our favourite influences. It makes us love it even more. And
right.
Do you know what?
So go on, because
I was going to say, you've got bands in this day and age as well. Like, are you familiar with Greta Van Fleet?
No.
So Greta Van Fleet, they're a brand new, well, not brand new, they're about 4 albums in now, but they're a bunch of young guys out of, I think they're from like Tennessee, somewhere like that. And they are the closest thing you will ever hear to Led Zeppelin. I mean, it's uncanny. The guy who sings sounds so much like Robert Plant, but the guitar player plays like Jimmy Page, the drummer, it's all there, absolutely.
Right,
and if you listen to their first 2 albums, they got so much stick because they sounded so much like Led Zeppelin. But that was exactly why I loved them. And I went to see them time and time again, every chance I got. I bought every album they've done, and I absolutely love them to death because they're doing something that sounds so much like what I love.
Brilliant. Right. Andy, we've got the 10-minute warning coming up, so let's finish this and let's wrap up what we're doing. Okay, so Spaceship. We've gone a little bit psychedelic and a little bit fast intro riff, and I've put Hello Joe Satriani during the middle bridge.
I think that's a bit of I'll take that, but yeah, the guitar solo, I wanted to do something nice and quick and rapid there, but it's got that sort of vibe. I wanted to write a song about spaceships. I'm obsessed with sci-fi, as you know. In fact, I just cleared them out. But back there, I used to have a display with hundreds of like little model spaceships on and all that. And I'm completely obsessed with Star Trek and Star Wars and all that. And I just always really wanted to be abducted by aliens and go off into a spaceship. And you know, the world that we live in these days is really stressful, and you know, there's a lot of bad things going on in the world, and sometimes it just feels like it might be better off if we were abducted by aliens and we could fly off into space. So that's why the hook on the chorus there is like, it's not abduction if you're the one piloting, right? You know, if you're on chat, you've got your own spaceship and you're out there doing it, you know. And then we were cheeky and we borrowed the little 4 notes from Close Encounters, and we made that whole middle section based around the Close Encounters little John Williams soundtrack thing.
Nice.
And played around with it. It gets a bit punk towards the end, and then it has some silly lyrics. But it was just some fun. It was just a sample.
So, like I say, any bands I've mentioned, and we will get to the last song in a second. Any bands I've mentioned, it's not so much that, like I said, I don't think you're copying them. I'm like, if these bands that I mentioned were doing something a little bit more bluesy, this might be how they might sound. So, like I say, the whole time, without a shadow of a doubt, yeah, I mean, blues metal, blues hard rock / nudging on the edge of touching the side of blues metal. It's sort of, I mean, it's not metal. It's not sort of riffy enough. It doesn't repeat enough. There's enough melodic. There is enough melody in it. There is enough variation in what's going on for it to not be metal. It's not just 3 or 4 riffs repeated out and then a solo over the top. It's all of it has a very clear metal, a very clear bluesy feel to all of it. And now I don't have a lot written for Fool No More because The second time round I was listening to it and writing the notes, I started listening to that, and that's the point I went, oh, I'm going to play along to this one. So I got my guitar out and played along to Fall No More. And so, correct.
Yeah.
So this is the only time then I can ask you, if I'm right, is it in F sharp? Fall No More.
It's E.
It is. Oh no, E. Yeah, I thought it was F sharp at first, and then I was like, well, that kind of sounds right. But then I moved it to E, and I was like, oh yeah, that's yeah. Now you mention it, yeah. Then I went to E and went, okay, that's better. That sounds more like it, yeah. But I'm not good at. So I wasn't so much picking out riffs. I was just like noodling over the top of it. I was just like.
Well, that's basically what that song is. That song was an accident.
Right.
It was never meant to be on the album.
7 minutes of it, mind.
7.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's the point I want to make about that actually, but the whole reason that song exists on the album is we went into the studio and the whole recording happened over 10 days. But we wanted to try and get it done as quickly as possible, and we planned for 12 songs. And Full No More wasn't one of them. And the first 3 days, the way we had it planned, the first 3 days were all meant to be where we would track the bass and the drums.
Right.
And then the rest of the sessions up to 7 days were going to be the guitars and the vocals. But in those first 3 days, the guys did so good tracking their parts. We ended up with extra time spare. So JB, the producer, said, guys, do you want to do an extra song? We were like, yeah, okay. So we couldn't honestly think of what we wanted to do. And Full No More, we'd been doing that live almost since the beginning. And we just play. It was one of these ones where we never. If you ever come and watch our live shows, if you come and watch more than one, you'll see that there are quite a lot of songs where we play them different every time.
Right.
Because we leave room for improvisation. That was kind of part of our philosophy from the start. Let's not be too rigid with how we play any of the songs we do. Let's leave some room in there for jazz mistakes and an improvisation, right? And Full No More was always that. It was always, let's just play it how we feel on the night. It's a very open song in that sense. So that's what we did on the day in the studio. And we just dived into it. And yeah, 7.5 minutes later, we wrapped it up. And while we caught the drums and the bass in one take, I retracked the guitars. But when you listen to that song, what you're hearing is one take. The whole 7.5 minutes is just one guitar take. There's no overdubs, no cuts, no edits. It's just what you got when I started playing that song all the way through to the end. So yeah, and same with the drums and the bass.
That's brilliant, Andy. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to spend some time with you tonight. I'm really conscious, unfortunately, we have to wrap this up.
Brett, thank you very much.
Run out of time.
I think we timed this quite nice because we've been talking for a while, haven't we, about getting this done, but having the album to talk about, I think made it much more worthwhile. So thank you very much.
Please do let me know when you've got a release date so I can let everyone else know as well through the podcast.
I certainly will. And yeah, best of luck for building out the podcast. I'm a great fan of podcasting, and yeah, I fully support your efforts there, and I hope you get the following you deserve.
Thank you. You too. Bloody brilliant album. Bloody good for you guys. It's really, really amazing. That will be going in the car as a regular listen, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for your time this evening. I really appreciate that.
All right.
Take care, pal. Cheers.
Well, as always, I hope you enjoyed that. It was really great to spend some time with Andy, and really great to be able to sit with somebody who's actually created an album and talk with them about that album, so that I can discuss it with the person who created it and actually get first-hand feedback from the creator, as opposed to just speculating myself about maybe what some of their inspirations were or where they got some of the ideas from. So, as always, let's have some notices about jams coming up. So we've got the 5 regular jams. We've got the Colin Staples Blues Jam at the Navigation Inn, Castle Lock, Nottingham, 9 p.m. every Wednesday. We've got the Great British Blues Jam at the Temple of Arts and Music in London. That's at 42 Newington Causeway SE16DR every Saturday from 3:30 in the afternoon onwards. We got the Blue Lamp in Aberdeen, that's at 121 Gallow Gate, that's AB251BU, that's every Wednesday from 8 PM onwards. And we've got the 2 jams that Damien puts on, the 2 backdoor blues jams, one at the Orchard Inn, Hanover Place, Harbourside, Bristol, BS1 6XT. That's 8:30 in the evening till close every Monday evening. And then the backdoor jam at Queen of Cups in Glastonbury, which is 10 to 12 North Lode Street, BA6 9JJ. That's every Sunday, 5 in the afternoon till 7 in the evening. So moving on, we've got the Pigsty Hill Blues Jam at the Golden Lion in Bristol on the last Thursday of each month, 9 till 11 PM. So according to my calculations, that should be the 29th of August. Then we have the monthly Blues Jam at Arnside Sailing Club, the Old Customs House Promenade, Arnside. That's at LA50HD is the postcode, and that's Sunday the 25th at 4 in the afternoon till 7:30 PM. Then we have the Lewis Road Jam in Brighton, 158 Lewis Road, the first Sunday of each month, 2 PM till 5 PM, so that should be the 1st of September. The Terraplanes Blues Jam at the Cruising Club Boat, Bristol, last Sunday of each month, 2 in the afternoon till 5 in the afternoon on the 25th of August. And then the Red House Blues Jam in Stourbridge, the first Wednesday of each month, starting at 9 PM, so that should be the 4th of September. As always, check those out yourself to make sure they're all happening. And if you're interested in going to a blues jam but you've never been to one and you're either a little bit anxious or skeptical about it, just go along. Make sure you don't even need to take your instrument if you don't want to the first time you go, so you can just go, get a feel for what it's like, see what everyone's doing, but I would highly recommend going and playing. It doesn't matter what level you're at, you can go in there and tell people you're a beginner and they will make sure they look after you. All the blues jams that I've been to are very welcoming, and people will look after you. So grab your instrument and get yourself to a blues jam. It will massively improve your playing no matter what level you're at. Thank you very much for joining me here on the Blues Jam podcast. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen and heard today. If you have, make sure you subscribe or follow so you don't miss out on following episodes. And I look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.